Hi, I'm Dr. Shelley Meyer and welcome to my channel. On this channel we talk about hormone health, gut health, and gene health. And today is no exception. We're going to talk about natural solutions to thyroid disease. Thyroid disease is one of the most common complaints that I see patients for in my functional medicine clinic. I'm a functional medicine physician, family doctor, registered dietitian, and nutritionist. So we talk about thyroid disease a lot, and we're going to talk today about some natural ways we can combat thyroid illness instead of just relying on medication. I am not against medication. We use medication all the time, but there are some other ways we can support our endocrine system, our hormone gland systems, to make them work more smoothly and to make everything work better together and to have better thyroid health. And maybe rely less on medications at that point. So we'll break it down today into diet, nutrients including herbs, minerals, and vitamins that you can use to support your thyroid. We'll also talk about exercise and the ways that exercise can affect your thyroid and some supportive exercises you can do for your thyroid. At the end, we will talk about some bonus tips in your environment and how we can adjust your environment to help support a healthier thyroid. So stay tuned all the way to the end. If you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to learn more about gut health, hormone health, and gene health. And if you'd like to know when our videos pop up, you can hit the bell notification button. So let's jump right in. We're going to talk about first what the thyroid is, and it's a gland that sits in our neck right here, like a butterfly-shaped gland, that makes our thyroid hormone, that controls metabolism, our temperature regulation, often contributes to our energy levels in our body. If you're hypothyroid, you can be under energy or low energy, and if you're hyperthyroid, you can have too much energy or feel nervous or in anxiety. So not too much energy in a good way, but we're feeling anxious or something like that. So mood plays a lot into thyroid disease as well. Some uncommon symptoms we might not think of with thyroid, or if we're constipated, that can be hypothyroidism, and if you're having loose, frequent bowel movements, that could be hyperthyroidism. You could have PMS or irregular periods in relation to thyroid disorders. You could also have dry skin, baggy bags under your eyes, or swelling in your face, swelling in some of your extremities. So those could all be signs of thyroid problems. So thyroid problems can be checked for easily with simple blood work. One of the most common reasons for thyroid disorders is autoimmune disease, and particularly Hashimoto's, which is where or Graves is an autoimmune disease with thyroid problems too. But Hashimoto's is the most common cause of underactive thyroid or hypothyroidism. So with Hashimoto's, your immune system attacks the thyroid itself, and at first you can have high thyroid hormones or hyperthyroidism, and then result in low thyroid hormones or hypothyroidism. And Graves is another type of autoimmune disease, but that is usually hyperthyroidism. So those are important terms to know, and it's important to know that you can see your provider and they can check for thyroid antibodies. And it is important to check for thyroid antibodies because we want to know if you have an autoimmune disease. That will be managed in a bit different of a way than just a case of hypothyroidism would. So get those checked out if you have not seen your provider. Ask them to check those. Often we will see people with depression or anxiety, and we'll check for thyroid disorders, and we'll find that. And once we correct the thyroid or improve the function of the thyroid, then the mood disorders could get better. Also, regular periods could come back if we work on your thyroid. So there's a lot of reasons to go have your thyroid checked. So let's dive right in. We're going to talk today about diet, like I said, diet, nutrients, exercise, and some environmental factors. So let's jump right into diet. So why is it important to follow a special diet with thyroid problems? Well, a lot of times thyroid disorders can be triggered by a leaky gut, or thyroid problems can trigger a leaky gut. This kind of can be either or, and it's hard to figure out which one comes first. So with leaky gut, we can have the antigen, antibody complexes, or autoimmune complexes leak through and trigger symptoms of gut imbalance and bloating, a lot of times abdominal pain. We can also have inflammatory complexes that will cause leaky gut too. So whenever we have leaky gut, and often it will go hand in hand with autoimmune disease, and particularly thyroid problems, So when we have leaky gut, we don't want to further trigger it with other things that are going to trigger autoimmune kind of reactions, like gluten, for example. A lot of people will have either celiac disease or underlying gluten problem, and a lot of people are undiagnosed. So if gluten's going to trigger some kind of autoimmune reaction in you, and you already have another autoimmune disease, you don't want to be triggering more autoimmune antibody complexes. You also don't want to be causing more inflammation, and gluten can cause inflammation in a lot of people. Also, sugar can cause inflammation. So we don't want to eat more inflammatory foods like gluten and sugar when we have thyroid disease. So we would look at limiting gluten or keeping gluten out of the diet for at least 4 weeks to try to see if that makes a difference. Another thing would be to cut all refined sugar out. That's a general rule for most of us. So there is no harm in doing that. And a lot of times you can feel a lot better when you do that. So I would definitely recommend that as a top tier thing to do. And then also considering cutting gluten out. Now, if you don't feel better after 4 weeks of cutting gluten out, you can add it back in and see if it makes any difference. Another diet that really helps people that have more of the extreme versions of thyroid problems or just having trouble managing their autoimmune disease, in particular their thyroid autoimmune disease, we will do an autoimmune protocol, which is no gluten, no dairy, no sugar. It can be more restrictive than that as far as nightshades and other restrictions, but a lot of times we'll start out with no gluten, no dairy, no sugar. And not everybody needs this, not everybody's cut out for that. So if you feel like that's just too much and you don't need to go that restrictive, then it's not an across-the-board prescription. Everybody has to do the same thing. But we just want you to think about trying to do these things. And you could also try to eat organic, as most of us should, because the less pesticides and the less artificial ingredients, that's not the same as organic, but the less artificial ingredients we have and the less refined products we have, the less inflammation we have. So that's a good thing to focus on with diet. The next level we're going to talk about would be nutrients, including vitamins, minerals, and herbs. So one of the most important nutrients for thyroid health is selenium. We hear a lot of talk about selenium in thyroid health. We prefer that you get your selenium through diet. A good way to get it is through Brazil nuts. But you can take supplemental selenium. It's just you would want to have your levels checked. And there are lots of functional medicine labs or even LabCorp Quest where you can check your selenium levels. So we just want to make sure we're not overdoing it because there are some toxicity symptoms, or there is some toxicity associated with selenium. Usually want to keep it under 200 micrograms. But even if you're supplementing at 200 micrograms, you still want to have your levels checked. Selenium can also be found in chicken and eggs. It can be found in shiitake and crimini mushrooms and in tuna, salmon, and trout. Another nutrient we want to talk about that's important is zinc. Zinc, you need adequate zinc to have a good functioning thyroid. Also, if you have a thyroid deficiency or hypothyroidism, you can then cause a zinc deficiency. So you definitely just need to have optimal levels of zinc for the thyroid to function well. Whenever you supplement with zinc, you always want to supplement with copper. So zinc is a pretty safe supplement. It can upset your tummy if you have a bit too much of it, but whenever you have 10 milligrams of zinc in a supplement, you want to have 1 milligram of copper. So in our practice, we use some supplements that are balanced with zinc and copper in them in that ratio. But zinc can also be found in your diet, and we always want you to try to get your nutrients from your diet whenever you can. So zinc is also found in some of the animal products that we talked about, like the meats, the seafood. It can be found in nuts and seeds and beans too, for those of you that are vegetarian. I'm vegetarian, so I do get my zinc through nuts and seeds and beans. So think about zinc when you're thinking about thyroid health also. Another key nutrient is vitamin B12. That is, that if that's deficient, that can also impair your thyroid function. But if your thyroid function is deficient or you don't have enough thyroid hormones being produced, you can be B12 deficient. Now, B12 is abundant if you're a carnivore or omnivore. So if you have animal products in your life, you usually have enough B12. So if you're deficient in B12, get that checked out and figure out why you're deficient in B12. It could be related to the thyroid, or it could be related to gut function, and we'll talk about that more in another video. So definitely think about B12. And if you're a vegan, you probably need to supplement with B12. Get your levels checked, but usually you need to supplement with B12 because you're not getting it in any kind of animal source. So sublingual B12, if you need extra B12, is what I recommend, and that's usually the liquid drops that you put under your tongue. and those work really well. And you do want to check your levels and make sure you're supplementing it at the right dose, and check your gut function, make sure you're absorbing. So another nutrient you want to think about is vitamin D. Vitamin D, we can be deficient in the winter, we can be deficient in the summer. So make sure those levels are checked. That's easy enough to check with your provider through a standard blood test. A lot of times insurance companies will deny it, in which case we have a subscription service for wholesale labs, and you can get it checked through a wholesale lab for cheaper. But oftentimes they'll cover it too, so it all depends on your insurance company. But if your vitamin D is not adequate, then your thyroid is usually not functioning well, or not necessarily, but they do interrelate. So you do need adequate vitamin D levels when you're thinking about natural thyroid health. So looking into that, getting those levels checked, and then supplementing with either a liquid or a gel cap is the best way to do it. And you would take or get some sun exposure too, healthy sun exposure. It's hard to get adequate vitamin D when you're trying to correct a deficiency. It's hard to get adequate vitamin D just in your diet because we're made to make it from the sun, and we don't get as much sun as we used to. We're indoors, or we're sunscreen protecting because we don't want to get the cancer risk from the sun. So another herb that could really help is ashwagandha. You do want to always talk to a herbalist or a functional medicine doctor or a naturopathic doctor if you're going to supplement with herbs. Make sure it's safe for you. But that can be very supportive of overall glandular health, female hormone health, male hormone health, thyroid health, adrenal health. It's a great thing to consider when you're thinking about the natural solutions to thyroid disease. So next, let's dive into exercise. So what kinds of exercises are helpful and supportive for the thyroid? Well, it all depends on your symptoms. It depends on how you're feeling. If you're having a low day, you're hypothyroid, you're really fatigued, don't push it. Don't stress yourself too much. Don't do those long distance marathon, half marathon kind of exercises. Go more with yoga or Pilates. If you are a runner, if you do endurance exercise of some sort, I recommend you break it into a high intensity interval followed by a low intensity interval. Running, then walking, running, then slow running. Something like that to kind of give your cortisol and your hormone system time to recover and not think that's in an emergency state. So yoga has some great poses for your thyroid. The inverted shoulder stand, the cobra pose, the bridge pose, the pigeon pose. Those are all ways that you can bring blood flow to your thyroid. Also the deep breathing that's in yoga, that's a great practice to learn because that can help support the adrenal system. And the thyroid and the adrenal and cortisol system are very linked, and you want both of them to be healthy. Pilates is another great slow, steady movement kind of exercise that can be very supportive of the cortisol system, which then will help support the thyroid and also be supportive on those days that you might be feeling your hypothyroidism. Also, they can help with hyperthyroidism, help to calm down the system too. Usually you need some medication with hyperthyroidism and even with hypothyroidism, so I'm not saying, again, to go without medication. Definitely see a provider if you have abnormal thyroid function. So that's the kind of the basics of the exercise piece of it. Now with the bonus part that we were going to talk about with the environment, we do want to think about endocrine disruptors. So what are endocrine disruptors? Those are things in our environment that can screw with our hormones. So an example is BPA. BPA is getting less and less in our environment because of people being aware that it does mess with our hormones. So any hard plastic, though, even the other ingredients that they used in place of BPA can screw up our thyroid hormones, our cortisol hormone, and our female and male hormones. So definitely try to get the plastics out of your life. Use more glass or stainless steel or other things that you can put your food in, or even the stuff that your cosmetics or anything comes out of. Try to think about really limiting that plastic. Also, try to filter your water. You can get a good in-house filtration system that's expensive, but you can also get filters like Brita and those kind of things that you can put onto your sinks, and that will help. You can get a zero water filter. I really like those for a pitcher, and then you can just kind of use that water for cooking and drinking and that kind of thing. The in-house filtration system is the best because it works through the sinks and the showers too, but that's expensive and you really do have to budget for that. So you can start with some of these lower budget things or just stick with those if that's all you can afford. But getting the superfluoridated water out of your system, and the chlorinated water or the chloramines out can help support a healthy thyroid. So those are our tips for today. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and hit the subscribe button if you want to learn more about hormone, gut, and gene health. And don't forget to hit the bell notification. Thanks, and thanks for joining us. Be healthy.